The Master of Life has many abilities, from as simple as energy manipulation to as complex as Draconis form. There are many things that have spanned over the life cycle of Ninjago that we have seen that are truly mesmerizing to see. But with all of these abilities being as accessible as they are, the thing is that there are also abilities that will naturally just fall by the wayside. Things that just don't have a place anymore within modern Ninjago for any sort of reason that the writers do deem fit. But the thing is that we are aware of those abilities, and theoretically any character is still capable of them, and Lloyd is definitely one of the biggest examples of that. He has shown many different things that he can do, and he just simply chooses not to. So in today's video, I've selected 3 of the most prominent abilities that we have ever seen Lloyd use, and try and explain how they occur, why they occur, and how they may have been forgotten about, and try to give some sort of reasonable explanation beyond simply put, the writers no longer allow him to do that. And I would love to know before anything else, do you wish these abilities that I bring up will come back? I would love to know what you think, because honestly, I kinda want to see them back as well. But let me not waste any more of your time, and let's talk about the forgotten abilities of Lloyd. Now, I want to make it abundantly clear what I mean by forgotten ability. The 3 that I have selected today are abilities that we have seen in a season of Ninjago that we have never seen beyond that particular season. And more importantly, the ability is something that theoretically is still well within the scope of what Lloyd is capable of. So I'm not referencing Golden Power, for example, because we know why Golden Power isn't around. There is one ability that I theorize is to do with Golden Power, but also it's been semi-confirmed that it's not. So it will be more clear when I go into what I'm on about, but regardless of it, it is clear that these are abilities that aren't coming back beyond their originating season. But I may as well talk about the one that I did just reference. The first forgotten ability in question is going to be Lloyd's energy bike that we actually get to see within Rebooted. This is a bike that Lloyd is able to summon using his elemental powers that he used fairly consistently around the latter end of the season. The bike actually started out theoretically as a byproduct of Golden Power, and that is what it seemingly was towards the beginning of it. But during the season, when Lloyd actually loses his Golden Power, he is still able to call in that bike. We see it at least in 2 occasions when he does no longer have the abilities. So it means that it is actually an extension of his actual life powers itself, which means that Lloyd has been able to use it ever since that moment, but he has simply chosen not to. And that is the confusing thing. There are many instances throughout Ninjago where Lloyd very easily could have used the vehicle, but he chooses not to, and he doesn't choose to call in that specific bike. So it wonders why this has actually been forgotten. Well, there's 2 ideas behind why that may actually be the case. The first theoretical reason as to why is simply put, the set would have been discontinued. That bike coincides with the rebooted wave of sets, where we actually get to see a set dedicated to that specific vehicle. And of course, after that season itself, that bike would eventually be retired and would no longer be able to be seen. So LEGO don't profit out of them using this bike within the show anymore. Instead, they can give Lloyd a reason to have a different vehicle, or a different dragon, and they can make a set because of it and make more money. It's always that simple when it does come to LEGO. But the alternative reason, and a more specific in-universe reason as to why this could be the case, is actually going to be the fact that Lloyd may no longer actually be able to call in that bike. Well, you may argue the fact that he is using life power to actually call it in. You could theorize that potentially when Lloyd actually let go of his Golden Power, whether it was stolen by the Overlord or given to the rest of the ninja, he probably only had mere slivers of that power left. Lloyd probably still had remnants of it because power is never truly lost, but the thing is that it's still completely possible that Lloyd was still using a mere fraction of Golden Power to call in that bike, and eventually, after a long period of time, he just simply wasn't able to call in on those slivers anymore, meaning that Lloyd just simply no longer had access to it because of the longevity of no Golden Power. It is a loose explanation, sure, but honestly, I don't see any other way around it, and I actually do kind of like that explanation. As a byproduct of the loss of the power, he loses more than just everything in an instance. So that is the first forgotten ability, and it is fairly easy to explain that one away. But as we go further in, you'll realize that that becomes less and less easy. So let's actually get into the second ability. And that is going to be his ability to manipulate vehicles into his own vehicle, stemming from what we saw last time but going into a different direction. In Tournament of Elements, we get to see Lloyd take over one of the Anacondrae buggies, making it into one of his own, and we see definitively it is a byproduct of his life powers. We see him fully transform it into his own respective image. A really cool ability, but we only actually get to see it the one time. Now again, I'm going to give a very solid out-of-universe argument. That wave of Tournament of Elements sets came with a Lloyd buggy, and they needed a reason to have it in the show for product placement. So they gave Lloyd that ability, essentially just to shoehorn in the vehicle. It is a very blunt way of looking at it, but it's just kind of the objective truth. LEGO will ultimately want just a way to shill their own products. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because it was cool in the show, but again, it's just simply the case. I don't know what you want me to tell you. As for an in-universe explanation as to why we've never seen this again, well, actually, it may just be the case of he's never really had an opportunity to. When I think about it and when I look at Lloyd in retrospect, I can't really recall many instances where Lloyd takes over an enemy's vehicle or just a vehicle in general and is needed to transform it into his own individual thing. Now, I could see the argument for the buggy in particular because obviously he did seemingly make upgrades because it seemed to be faster. But the thing is that any other time, the vehicles are either already Lloyd's to begin with or just not really a vehicle that he would take over. So, by all accounts, Lloyd may actually be fully capable of still being able to do this. It would make sense and it would actually show even further that it's forgotten, but also not. But I do think, realistically speaking, it is something that he could still theoretically do. He's just not in the situation that does require it. So whilst it, like I said, it falls into the category, it's probably the most likely one to actually come back. But this is where we go into the last ability, and definitely the one that could come back and has no reason not to, but I highly doubt that it will, because it comes from crystallized. Because this is going to be the case of Lloyd's Oni powers. Now, Oni form in of itself is not something that Lloyd obviously wants to go back to, and I doubt he ever would. But the thing is that crystallized establishes the fact that anger is the main thing that goes into Oni power. Anger is ultimately what fuels that side of the balance, and it is the thing that unleashes that power. And we see that happen with Lloyd. Lloyd, on a few occasions, goes into some form of Oni or destructive powers just based on his anger. And the thing is that we haven't seen it again in Dragon's Rising. It's not like he hasn't been angry in Dragon's Rising, maybe he hasn't been that angry in Dragon's Rising, but who really knows? The thing is that regardless of how you look at it, Lloyd getting angry should still be unlocking Oni power. It still should be something that he has to deal with, something he has to manage and juggle, but it seems to be that he doesn't actually have to. Because like I said, it seems to be that they have just forgotten the fact that Lloyd's anger does lead down that path. Now, again, this could be something that could be changed down the line, and by all accounts, it probably should be. But regardless of how we look at it, as of Season 4 Part 1, where Lloyd definitely has been angry since, he has had no indication of that power actually ever being a problem. Even if they don't want to outright show it, show that Lloyd is actually trying to handle his anger in a different way. We've had no reason to believe that this is actually the case, and honestly, it should be. Because Oni power is a very active and very problematic thing when it does come to Lloyd's temper, and if he does lose his temper, it should be an active problem. The main thing I'm thinking of is, for example, when Kai was actually banished to the nether space in Season 2 Part 1. No reaction from Lloyd? You think he would, but he doesn't. It's just one of those things that just comes across as very strange in my opinion, and should be an active thing that is discussed. But it's not, and it's seemingly been forgotten. In terms of the reasoning as to why we haven't seen it within universe, it is most likely what I said. Lloyd off camera has done some anger management and he is learning to handle his emotions better. But that's definitely something that should have been shown when it does come down to it. But in terms of out-of-universe explanation as to why this has been forgotten, the most likely case scenario is the negative reception behind Crystallized. It was a very controversial thing, even though a lot of people do want to still see Oni form, but at the end of the day, it is something that came from a season that is widely disliked. So I just think it falls into the category of many things that was introduced in that season or reintroduced into that season where they don't want to mention it as a means to play it safe. So Oni form and Lloyd's abilities around it are going to sit in the corner with Harumi and the Overlords. It just again makes sense. But I do think on an overall, it honestly doesn't really matter that these abilities have gone by the wayside. At the end of the day, we don't want the ninja to be too overpowered because we wouldn't really have a show with stakes, with emotion, with fear. And that is ultimately one of the main things that we do want in a Ninjago season. And if Lloyd just has access to vehicles here and there, has access to destructive powers, it would just kind of come across as bland. Because anything you throw at him, he would be able to counteract. So it is a net positive. I just wish these abilities just weren't erased like they just never existed. It would just make more sense to give us explanations because that's just simply how a story should work. But obviously that's my opinion and I would love to know what yours is. But thank you very much for watching the video and I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people. And if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Each of your support means the absolute world to me and I truly cannot thank you enough. But like I said, that's about it for today and take care. Okay,